They told me to feed the cat and keep the heating on low, the way you speak to someone useful but not family in the way that counts anymore. You're too old for 12-hour flights and all that sun, Gran. Just look after the house. That's what they said. My son Robert, his wife Claire, and the 2 grandchildren, before they loaded the Navy estate car with suitcases and sun cream and drove off talking about whitewashed villages and grilled octopus in Crete. I stood on the doorstep in my slippers and cardigan and lifted one hand in the little wave they expected. They never saw that my mouth had gone flat. The next morning, the postman left a thick white envelope on the mat. Inside, 4 British Airways tickets, London Heathrow to Heraklion via Athens, departing in 4 days. 4 names printed in neat black type: Robert Harris, Claire Harris, Olivia Harris, 17, Noah Harris, 14. My name, Margaret Rose Harris, was nowhere. Of course it wasn't. I carried the envelope into the kitchen and laid the tickets on the pine table like evidence in a trial no one had bothered to invite me to. Then I did what every 73-year-old English woman does when the ground tilts. I filled the kettle and waited for my hands to stop shaking. They didn't. The tickets sat there accusing me of being surplus. When the tea was strong enough to stand a spoon in, I opened the flip phone I still refused to replace and rang the airline. "Good morning. I'd like to cancel booking reference 7K9P2M. The young man sounded startled. "May I ask why, Mrs. Harris?" "No," I said quietly. "Just cancel it, please." He did. I wrote the confirmation code on the back of the electricity bill and slipped it into the pocket of my apron. I walked through the bungalow I have lived in for 49 years, ever since Arthur carried me over the threshold with mud on his boots and laughter in his throat. Every room still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco and the lavender bags I sew every spring. I had been wife, district nurse, school governor, jam maker, knitter of school scarves, fixer of grazed knees and teenage heartbreak. For the last 15 years, I had been simply Gran, spoken in the same breath as "mind the thermostat" and "don't let the cat out after dark." I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser. My passport, renewed 2 years ago just in case, lay on top of the silk headscarves Arthur brought back from Singapore in 1978. Under it, the savings account book, £27,800, scraped together from overtime shifts and not spending on myself, plus the widow's pension. No mortgage, no one who truly needed me to stay behind and keep the stove warm. I went upstairs to the spare room that used to be Robert's and opened the laptop he insisted I learn for emergencies. I booked 1 ticket, Heathrow to Heraklion, same date, aisle seat. Then I rang my neighbor Joyce. "Could you feed Tigger and bring the Benz in for a few weeks?" "Of course, love. Going somewhere nice?" "Just needing some sea air," I said. I packed 1 small wheeled case, 4 cotton frocks, sensible sandals, the pearl brooch Arthur gave me the day Olivia was born, and the navy silk dress I wore to his funeral because it was the only thing that still made me look like the woman he married instead of the ghost I had become. The night before I left, I sat in the conservatory among the geraniums. The street was quiet. Only the distant hum of the ring road and the soft clink of wind chimes Joyce gave me when Arthur died. I thought about what they would say when their booking vanished. I thought about the 5 family holidays I had paid half-chords and never been invited on. I was finished being the reliable ghost in my own house. At 5:30, the taxi came. I locked the front door, left the key under the 3rd plant pot for Joyce, and walked down the path without looking back. At Heathrow, the girl at check-in glanced at my white hair and gave the bright, slightly pitying smile they keep for old ladies traveling alone. "Have a wonderful trip, Mrs. Harris." I took my boarding pass and moved forward, the wheels of my case whispering against the terminal floor like a secret. On the aircraft, I had 29C, aisle. The window seat stayed empty until a man in his 40s, quiet eyes, wedding ring, tired shoulders, folded himself into it with a sigh. "Long flight?" he asked politely. "Long enough," I replied, and closed my eyes. I slept in snatches, the kind of sleep that keeps rage from boiling over into something you can't take back. When I woke, we were already over the Aegean, a sheet of hammered turquoise under the wing. That was the moment it truly landed. I had done it. I was not flying to Crete to chase them or shame them. I was flying because they had told me I was too old, too frail, too inconvenient to come. Heraklion Airport smelled of hot tarmac and pine resin. I took a taxi to a small pension above a quiet bay south of the tourist strip. White walls, blue shutters, a landlady named Maria who called every woman over 60 Curia, like it still meant queen. She showed me to a corner room with a balcony straight over the sea. I set my case down, opened the shutters, and let the salt wind slap the last of England out of my lungs. I did not cry. I simply sat on the edge of the narrow bed and felt every Christmas I had cooked for 12 while they opened presents. Every school concert I sat alone in the back row because Gran doesn't mind waiting in the car. Every birthday where I baked my own cake and pretended I preferred it that way. That evening I walked the pebbled beach until my calves ached. I bought a paper cone of tiny fried fish and ate them slowly, watching children chase waves that turned pink in the sunset. No one was waiting for a photo. No one was asking whether I had remembered to pay the window cleaner. The silence tasted like the first day of the rest of my life. 2 mornings after I arrived, I was sitting at the little breakfast table under the lemon tree, spreading honey on warm bread, when a voice from the next table said, "You put the honey on like you're painting the Sistine Chapel. I like a woman who takes her time." I looked up. A woman my age, perhaps a year or 2 older, with short silver hair cut like she had better things to do than fuss with it, and eyes the color of wet slate behind half-moon spectacles. She wore a linen shirt the shade of clotted cream and an expression that said she had already decided the day was hers. "I've waited 73 years, I answered. "I'm allowed to be slow with the good things now." She gave one short bark of laughter and moved her coffee cup to my table without asking. That was that. Her name was Irene Caldwell, retired headmistress from York, widowed 15 years, traveling alone because, in her words, the house started answering me back and I didn't like its tone. She had a voice like a church bell wrapped in velvet, clear, carrying, and impossible to ignore when she wanted something. We began walking together before the sun climbed high enough to punish us, up the dusty paths behind the village, past the little white chapels with their blue domes, past goats that stared at us like we were the strange ones. Irene noticed everything. A door painted the exact green of her mother's dressing gown the year the war ended. A cat curled inside a broken flower pot, like a comma in a sentence. The way the wind carried the smell of wild thyme farther than any postcard ever could. She never took photographs. She simply looked until the moment burned itself onto the inside of her eyelids. One noon, under a pergola, dripping with bougainvillea the color of fresh blood, she asked, "So, what did they do to you, Margaret?" I told her the short version. The tickets, the cancellation, the years of being the reliable ghost. She listened without pity or drama, then raised her glass of cold Retsina. "You're here," she said simply. "That's the whole bloody argument right there."
That night, I turned my phone on for the first time since landing. 42 missed calls, 29 from Claire, the rest from Robert. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I read the texts instead. Everything okay at home? Did you let the window cleaner in? Gran, please ring us. We're worried sick. The airline says the booking was canceled from the UK. Did you do this? Robert had left one voice note. I pressed play with the volume low so the sea could still be louder.
Mom, what are you trying to prove? The kids are upset. We thought you were just having a sulk. This is something else. Please, just call. I turned the phone off again and slept the sleep of a woman who has finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. The next morning, Irene stood in my doorway, holding 2 ferry tickets and a paper bag of still warm tiro pitha. Venice, she announced. I've never seen it without grandchildren hanging off my sleeves like wet coats. 2 nights, then we decide what country deserves us next. I should have said I needed to think about it. Instead, I heard myself answer, give me 15 minutes to pack my lipstick. We caught the afternoon catamaran to Athens, then the overnight train north. 2 narrow berths facing each other, the Adriatic sliding past the window like black satin. Irene read Agatha Christie in the original French. I watched moonlight shatter on the waves and felt the last iron band around my ribs snap loose. In Venice, we found rooms in a tiny locanda near Campo San Barnaba, far enough from San Marco that we could hear real Venetians arguing about football. Our room smelled of candle wax and canal. We wandered without maps, ate cicchetti standing up at Beccari, where the barman called Irene Bella and meant it, drank little glasses of Prosecco that tasted like cut grass and forgiveness. At night, we sat on the tiny wrought iron balcony, sharing a bottle of Valpolicella, and speaking of husbands who had died too young and children who had learned to manage perfectly well without us long before we noticed.
Claire's messages grew frantic. Gran, the police came round because Joyce thought you'd been taken ill. Where are you? This isn't funny anymore. Robert sent one line that made my chest hurt in a way I refused to name. Mom, Olivia cried herself to sleep last night. Please, just tell us you're safe. I did not reply. I was too busy learning how it felt to wake up without the weight of someone else's timetable pressing on my sternum. On our second evening in Venice, Irene and I sat on the edge of a tiny bridge watching the water turn the color of old pewter. She said, "You know you don't have to punish them forever, don't you?" "I'm not punishing them. I'm rescuing myself. There's a difference." She nodded once, satisfied, and passed me the last sip of wine. That night, I bought a postcard of the Bridge of Sighs. On the back, I wrote to Olivia in my careful copperplate. Darling girl, the water here is greener than your eyes ever were, even when you were small and furious about something. I am drinking coffee strong enough to wake the dead and walking until my feet forget England. I am not lost. I am learning how big the world is when you stop folding yourself small enough to fit in someone else's suitcase. Draw something fierce for me. All my love, Gran.
I posted it before I could change my mind. Then I turned my phone off again and followed Irene into the night. 2 old women laughing like girls who had just discovered the world had no curfew. From Venice, we flew west because Irene declared, I want to hear fado before my bones forget how to feel anything at all. We landed in Porto on a morning so soft, the light looked like it had been rinsed in milk. Our guest house was a narrow 4-story building in the Ribeira, painted the color of faded cornflowers, with a balcony so small we had to take turns standing on it. The landlady, Dona Amelia, greeted us with 2 tiny glasses of port and the information that señoras of a certain age are the only ones who truly understand longing. Irene raised her glass and said, "Then we are experts." The first 2 days, we did almost nothing. We sat on cafe terraces watching the Douro slide past like liquid bronze, eating pastéis de nata until the sugar stuck to our fingers, letting the city seep into us the way port seeps into oak. Irene caught a slight fever on the 3rd night. Nothing serious, just the kind of ache that reminds the body it is still alive. I made her stay in bed, brewed lemon and honey the way Arthur used to when the grandchildren had colds, and read aloud from a dog-eared volume of Fernando Pessoa we found on the shelf. She dozed off halfway through a poem about doors that only open from the inside. I kept reading anyway, because sometimes the words are for the reader more than the listener.
On the 4th evening, she was well enough to walk. We followed the sound of a single guitar down a cobbled alley so narrow our shoulders brushed both walls. The Fado house had no sign, only a cracked open door and a woman's voice spilling out like dark honey. Inside, 20 locals sat around bare wooden tables lit by one red bulb. The singer was 60 if she was a day, black shawl, blacker eyes, voice like a knife wrapped in velvet. She sang of sailors who never came home, of women who waited on cliffs, of love that leaves and love that stays and hurts just the same. I did not understand a word of Portuguese, but every syllable landed in my chest like a stone dropped into deep water. Irene's hand found mine under the table and squeezed once, hard. We stayed until the singer's voice cracked on the final note and the room exhaled. Later, back in our room, I stood on the balcony barefoot, letting the cool tiles bite my soles. The river below reflected 1,000 small lights, trembling the way my heart had trembled for years whenever I thought of speaking the truth out loud. I realized I had spent decades perfecticizing the art of swallowing sentences whole. I was full of undigested words. The letter came at dawn. I woke to the soft scrape of paper sliding under the door. A single sheet, thick cream stock, folded twice, my name written in Robert's impatient handwriting.
"Mom, we don't know what to think anymore. Olivia hasn't drawn anything in 2 weeks. Noah keeps asking if you're dead, and we don't know what to tell him. The police came again because Joyce thought you'd been murdered in your bed. We know you canceled the tickets. We know it was you. If this is about punishing us, you've done it. We're sorry we didn't invite you. We told ourselves it would be too much for you. That was a lie we told to make our lives easier. Please come home. We'll book you a ticket anywhere you want, first class, whatever you need. Just come home. Robert." No "I love you," no acknowledgement that they had planned an entire family adventure and simply forgotten to include the woman who had paid for half their previous holidays. Only fear that the furniture I'd walked out and taken the wallpaper with it. I sat on the edge of the bed with the letter in my lap while Irene pretended to hunt for her glasses so I could have privacy. When I finally looked up, she asked, gentle as morning, "Breakfast or burial?" I laughed. Actually laughed and said, "Breakfast. Then I need to buy a postcard." We ate grilled sardines and strong coffee in the square while old men played cards and argued about football. I bought a postcard of the Dom Luis Bridge at sunset, the sky bleeding orange into the river. On the back, I wrote to Olivia in my neatest handwriting, "My fierce girl, the river here is wide enough to hold every unsaid thing I ever swallowed. A woman sang last night about love that leaves and love that stays, and I understood every note even though the words were foreign. I am learning that silence can be a country you live in for decades without noticing the walls. I have left that country. Keep your pencils sharp. The world still needs your storms on paper. Love always. Graham." I posted it in the little blue box outside the post office before courage could desert me. Then I turned my phone on for the first time in 9 days. 78 missed calls, texts that started polite and descended into panic. "Claire,
The children are having nightmares. This has gone far enough. Robert. Mom, I swear if you don't answer in 24 hours, I'm contacting Interpol. Olivia. Gran, please just tell me you're alive. I drew you a picture of the sea and it looks wrong without you in it. I read them all, one by one, sitting on a bench in the shade of a jacaranda tree that dropped purple flowers on my shoulders like confetti at a funeral nobody had invited me to. Then I turned the phone off again and went to find Irene. That evening, we walked to the Miradoro at sunset. The whole city spilled down the hill in front of us, terracotta roofs glowing like hot coals. Irene bought 2 small bottles of ginger liqueur from a street vendor, and we drank them leaning on the railing while the sky turned the color of bruises. She said, "You know you'll have to speak to them eventually." "I know," I answered, "but not yet. First, I need to finish learning who I am when nobody is asking me to be smaller." A busker below us started playing fado on a battered guitar, the same melody from the night before. I closed my eyes and let the music stitch something inside me that had been unraveling for years. Later, in the dark of our room, I lay awake listening to Irene's soft snoring and the distant clanging of the old tram on the hill. I thought about the letter burning a hole in my bedside drawer. I thought about the years I had spent perfecting invisibility, fading into the background of school plays, of Christmas mornings, of every photograph where I was the one holding the camera. I thought about the way Claire used to say, "Oh, Gran doesn't mind. She's happy just watching," as though my happiness was a spectator sport.
I got out of bed, found the little notebook I had bought in Venice, and began to write by the light of the street lamp that leaked through the shutters. Things I refused to carry anymore. The belief that love is measured by how quietly I suffer. The idea that my age makes me decoration rather than person. The habit of saying I'm fine when I'm slowly disappearing. The shame of wanting more than the crumbs from someone else's table. I wrote until my hand cramped and the page was full. Then I turned to a fresh one and wrote a single line in capital letters. I was never the background. I was the whole picture, and they just cropped me out. I fell asleep with the notebook under my pillow and dreamed of oceans wide enough to swallow every apology I never owed. The next morning, Irene greeted me with 2 train tickets and a grin sharp as broken glass. "Seville," she said. "I want orange blossom and women who dance like they're arguing with God. After that, we'll see." I didn't even pretend to hesitate. I packed my navy silk dress, my pearl brooch, and the notebook full of truths too loud for home, and we left Porto the way you leave a love affair you're not ready to explain. Quickly, quietly, and without looking back. We arrived in Seville on a train that smelled of hot iron and orange peel. The air that rushed in when the doors opened was so thick with jasmine and warm stone that I felt it coat my lungs like syrup. Our room was in a tiny pension tucked behind the cathedral, a cool white box with a wrought iron balcony that looked straight down into a courtyard where an old fountain coughed water day and night. The landlady, Doña Carmen, took one look at our white hair and declared, "Aquí vienen las reinas," and meant it. Irene wasted no time. She bought a pair of enormous scarlet earrings the size of cherries and announced that Seville demanded color. I surprised myself by buying a yellow linen scarf, so bright it hurt to look at directly. I tied it around my neck the way I used to tie silk scarves in the 60s, when Arthur was still alive and I still believed I had a right to be noticed. That first evening, we followed the sound of hand clapping and stamping feet until we found a courtyard no wider than my bungalow's living room. A ring of people stood around the single woman dancing flamenco for no audience but the night itself. She was 75 if she was a day. Hair pulled back so tightly her face looked carved from oak. Black dress clinging to a body that had forgotten how to apologize. Her feet struck the tiles like accusations. Her arms rose and fell like judgment and mercy having an argument. The guitarist was young, maybe 25, but he played as though he had already lived every heartbreak the dancer was throwing at the sky. I could not move. I stood there with tears running down my cheeks and no idea they had started. Irene's hand found mine again and squeezed until my bones creaked. When the dancer finished, the small crowd erupted, but she only bowed once, curt and proud, then walked straight past us into the dark as though applause was something she neither needed nor wanted. Irene whispered, "That, Margaret, is what it looks like when a woman decides her life belongs to her." I could only nod. My throat was full of the dancer's footsteps. The next day we walked the Alcazar Gardens until our feet blistered. I stood beneath arches that had watched queens and poets and wars come and go, and I felt something inside me loosen, like an old knot finally giving way. I took a photograph of myself, the first in years, standing in the sunlight with my yellow scarf fluttering and my chin lifted. I did not smile for the camera. I simply existed in the frame, unapologetic and entire. That afternoon, I sat in a cafe under a striped awning and opened my phone for the first time in a week. 114 missed calls. Texts that had moved past panic into something rawer. "Claire, the school rang. Noah hasn't handed in homework in 10 days. He says there's no point if you're gone." "Robert, Mom, I've taken leave from work. I don't know where to look for you." "Olivia, I found your notebook open on the kitchen table in the photo Joyce posted on the Village Facebook page. I read every page. I'm so sorry, Gran. I didn't know." There was a voice memo from Olivia. I pressed play with the volume low so the fountain could still drown me if I needed it to. "Gran, it's me. I keep thinking about the summer I was 8 and you taught me to make blackberry jam and you let me lick the spoon, even though Mom said sugar rots teeth. You said some things are worth a little rot. I think I understand now. Please don't stay gone because we were stupid. I drew you something. I'll send it." A photo arrived seconds later. Me, standing on a cliff I had never visited, arms wide, yellow scarf flying like a flag of victory, the sea behind me wild and endless. Underneath, she had written in her spidery teenage handwriting. She remembered she was the storm, not the teacup. I stared at it until the screen went dark, then stared some more. Irene watched me over the rim of her lemonade glass and said nothing. She didn't need to. That night I could not sleep. The ceiling fan turned slow circles, and the city outside breathed heat and guitar notes through the open window. I got out of bed, wrapped myself in the robe, and opened my notebook to a fresh page. Things I know now. Love that asks you to disappear is not love. 73 is not an expiry date. Silence is only golden when it is chosen, not enforced. I have spent decades apologizing for taking up oxygen. No more. I wrote into the page was black with ink and my hand shook. Then I opened my phone and pressed record. I did not plan the words. I simply let them out.
Robert, Claire, this is your mother-in-law, the woman you left behind to water plants and keep the heating low. I am in Seville. I have heard flamenco that made my bones remember they are still alive. I have walked gardens built by people who believed beauty mattered more than convenience. I am not angry anymore. Anger is too small for what I feel. I am finished being the background and photographs you never thought to take of me. I love you all the way to the marrow of my bones, but love is not a currency I will spend to buy the right to exist in my own life. When I come home, and I will come home, things will be different. I will not sit quietly while plans are made around me. I will not smile and say, "Oh, Gran doesn't mind," when I do mind. If you want me at your table, you will set a place for Margaret, not for the ghost who irons your creases and pays half the bills and then goes home alone. I hope you understand. Good night. I pressed send before fear could claw it back. Then I turned the phone face down and went to stand on the balcony. The fountain below kept talking in its ancient language, and somewhere a woman laughed the way only women laugh when they have stopped asking permission. The next morning, Irene found me drinking coffee strong enough to strip paint. She took one look at my face and said, "You finally used your voice." "I did," I answered. "How does it feel?" "Like I've been holding my breath for 50 years and someone just opened the window." She raised her cup in salute. "Then the only thing left is to dance." That night, we went back to the same courtyard. The same dancer was there. Black dress, carved face, feet that spoke fluent fury. When she finished, the guitarist started a slower bulería, something almost playful. People began to pair off and dance in the small space. Irene looked at me, eyes bright with mischief. "Well?" I untied the yellow scarf from my neck and tied it around my hair like a girl going to her first dance. Then I stepped into the circle. I had not danced since Arthur's 60th birthday, and even then, only because he dragged me onto the floor. My knees protested. My hips were stiff. I did not care. I lifted my arms the way the old woman had, snapped my fingers the way I remembered from television, and moved. Not well, not gracefully, but wholly. A young man with kind eyes offered his hand for a turn. I took it, spun once, laughed out loud when I nearly fell, and kept going. Irene joined me, scarlet earrings flashing, and we danced together like schoolgirls who had broken curfew and discovered the world was kinder than anyone told us. We danced until my lungs burned and my legs shook, and the yellow scarf came loose and flew into someone's wine glass. When we finally stumbled back to the pension at 2 a.m, barefoot and giddy, Doña Carmen was waiting, with 2 glasses of cold water and the biggest grin I have ever seen on a human face. "You danced," she said in careful English. "We did," I answered. She kissed me on both cheeks and whispered, "Bienvenida a la vida, reina." We ended the journey where the Atlantic throws itself against the western edge of Europe, in a small fishing town south of Lisbon that Irene insisted still remembered how to be quiet. The guest house sat on a cliff above a beach the color of wet sand, and every evening the sky burned itself out in oranges and violets, so violent they looked like bruises healing into beauty. Irene caught another cold, this time deeper, the kind that makes you cough like an old engine.
So I looked after her the way I once looked after Arthur in his final winter. Soup, hot water bottles, reading aloud until she slept. She kept saying, "Don't fuss, woman," but she held my hand while she dozed, and that was answer enough. On our last night together, we sat on the terrace wrapped in blankets, watching fishing boats come in with their lights trembling on the black water. She said, "You're going home soon." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I answered. Different woman? Different everything. She left the next morning for York. We hugged at the tiny railway station without speeches. She pressed a small piece of sea-worn green glass into my palm and said, "Keep this. Proof you were once reckless." I still have it. I flew home alone 3 days later. The plane climbed above the clouds, and I looked down at the silver thread of the Tagus River and felt no sadness, only the clean ache of something finished properly. No one met me at Heathrow. I had not asked them to. I took the coach to the village, then a taxi the last 3 miles. The driver talked about his grandchildren. I listened and answered in single syllables and watched the familiar hedges slide past like pages of a book I had once known by heart and now read with new eyes. The bungalow was exactly as I left it. Joyce had kept the geraniums heroic. The post had been neatly stacked. Even the kitchen clock still ticked its slightly too fast tick. Nothing had moved, yet everything was unrecognizable because the woman walking through the rooms was no longer willing to be furniture. I made tea, strong, 2 sugars, the way I stopped taking it years ago because Claire said sugar was bad for me, and I drank it sitting at the head of the table, not in my corner chair. My phone finally came alive with messages I had ignored for weeks. Olivia, landed safe? Please say yes. Robert, Mom, I can be there in 40 minutes if you need anything. Claire, we've left the front door on the latch. Come whenever you're ready. I texted only Olivia. Home, cattle on, door open. She arrived 23 minutes later, hair dyed half purple since I last saw her, eyes red-rimmed but fierce. She dropped her rucksack in the hall and walked straight into my arms. We stood like that for a long time, her 17-year-old height folded down so her head could rest on my shoulder the way it did when she was 5. She smelled of train smoke and teenage perfume and apology. Eventually, she pulled back and said, "I brought my new sketchbook. You're in nearly every page." She opened it on the kitchen table. Page after page of me on the balcony in Crete with wind in my hair, me dancing in Seville with the yellow scarf flying, me standing on a cliff that existed only in her imagination, arms wide, mouth open in a shout no one had ever heard me make. On the last page, she had drawn the kitchen we were sitting in now, but the table was set for 5, and I sat at the head with a crown made of sea glass. I touched the drawing with one careful finger. "You saw me," I whispered. "I always saw you," she said. "We just forgot to look properly." The doorbell rang. Olivia looked at me. "That's them. I told them to wait an hour. They lasted 23 minutes. I laughed, actually laughed, and went to open the door. Robert stood on the step looking 10 years older than when I last saw him. Claire hovered behind, hands twisting the strap of her handbag like a schoolgirl. Neither of them knew where to put their eyes. "Come in," I said. They stepped over the threshold as though the floor might bite. We sat in the living room. Me in Arthur's old armchair that no one had dared sit in since he died. Them on the sofa, side by side, like children sent to the headmistress. Silence stretched, thick and elastic. Finally, Robert said, voice rough, "Mum, I don't know how to start." "You already have," I answered. "You're here."
Claire started crying quietly. Robert rubbed his face with both hands. "I read your notebook," he said, "the one Olivia photographed. Every page, twice. I didn't sleep for 3 nights.
Good, I said, and the word landed between us like a stone. He flinched, then nodded. I deserved that. I made more tea because it was something to do with my hands. When I came back with the tray, Olivia had moved to the floor beside my chair like a guard dog. I set the cups down and took my seat again. I'm not here to punish you, I said. I'm here to live in the same house as you without disappearing. Can you do that? Robert looked at his hands. We took you for granted. I see that now. I hate that I see it now. Claire wiped her eyes. We told ourselves it was kindness, keeping you from long flights and hot sun. It wasn't. It was cowardice. Your age frightened us because it reminded us we're next. I let the silence sit a moment longer, then said, I still love you. That hasn't changed. But love isn't a blank check for bad behavior. From now on, when you make plans that include family, you will include me, or you will tell me to my face why not. And I will decide if your reason is good enough. They both nodded like children who had just been told the rules of a new and terrifying game. We drank the tea. It was awful, too strong, too sweet, but nobody complained. Before they left, Robert lingered in the hallway. I kept the canceled tickets, he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket. I look at them every day, so I never forget how easy it is to erase someone. He held it out. I took it, opened it, and tore the tickets into small pieces right there on the doormat. Then I opened the front door and let the wind take the pieces down the path like white butterflies. Lesson learned, I said. He started to cry then, the way he hadn't since he was 9 and fell off his bike. I pulled him into a hug and felt his shoulders shake against mine. After they left, Olivia stayed. We cooked eggs and soldiers like when she was little, and she told me about the Art Foundation course in Glasgow she wanted to apply for. I told her to go, that the world was wide and waiting, and that nobody ever regretted being brave. She left at 11 with a promise to come back tomorrow and every tomorrow she could. I sat on the patio that night with Arthur's old pipe lighter in my hand. I never smoked, but I liked the weight of it. The geraniums glowed in the moonlight, and somewhere down the road a blackbird sang its heart out to an empty sky. I opened my notebook to the last blank page and wrote, Things I know at 73 I am not too old to begin. I am not too old to dance badly and laugh loudly. I am not too old to say no, or yes, or this is what I need. My children lost me for a summer and found me again, larger. My granddaughter watched me disappear and come back whole, and now she believes she can do the same. That is legacy enough. At the bottom, I added one final line. I was never the woman who stayed behind. I was always the woman who left so she could return on her own terms. I closed the notebook, set it on the table beside the green sea glass Irene gave me, and went inside. The house no longer felt like a museum of other people's memories. It felt like a place where a woman named Margaret Rose Harris had finally come home to herself. Some Sundays, I still cook roast dinner for 20. Some Sundays, I cook only for me and eat it on the patio in my dressing gown. Some Sundays, Olivia brings her new girlfriend and we drink wine that is too expensive and laugh until our ribs ache. Robert and Claire come when they are invited and they wait to be invited. They are learning the new rules, slowly, clumsily, sincerely. And if anyone ever again says, "Oh, Gran's too old for that," I simply smile, book the ticket, pack the yellow scarf, and go. Because I have learned that the world is very large, and at 73, my heart is finally large enough to fill it.